The alarm was the only sound left on the massive galactic space station. Everything was falling apart. The strongest warriors in the galaxy, creatures built for war, had been defeated in just seconds. Something invisible was hunting them. Something that no radar or sensor could ever track. The commander waited for his end. He knew that nothing on this station could stop this monster, but then, a soft sound echoed through the hall. Meow. A tiny, orange human pet had appeared. The monster thought it was the king of the dark. It was wrong. The real hunter had finally arrived. The Galactic Hub was the most advanced place in the universe. It was a giant station made of silver metal and glowing blue lights. Thousands of different alien species walked through its halls every day. Some were 10 feet tall with skin like rocks. Others had 4 arms and eyes that could see in the dark. In this world of giants and monsters, humans were the newcomers. To the rest of the galaxy, humans looked small, soft, and very weak. They didn't have sharp claws, they couldn't breathe fire, and they didn't have thick armor. Captain Miller was a tall man with gray hair and a calm face. He was the representative for Earth. As he walked toward the Great Hall for the council meeting, everyone stopped to stare. But they weren't looking at Miller. They were looking at the small, orange creature sitting inside a transparent bag on his chest. It was Leo, a common Earth cat. Leo was purring, his eyes half closed, looking bored. To the aliens, this was the funniest thing they had ever seen. They had heard rumors that humans kept pets, but they couldn't believe a human would bring one to the highest meeting in the galaxy. The doors to the council hall opened. Inside sat the leaders of the 5 most powerful alien empires. The most fearsome was General Kraz. Kraz was a Zogon, a creature with 6 eyes and skin covered in sharp green scales. His people were warriors who respected only strength. When Miller sat down, Kraz let out a loud, clicking laugh. The sound echoed through the massive room. The other leaders joined in. They pointed their long, strange fingers at Leo, who was now yawning and stretching his tiny paws. Captain Miller, General Kraz said, his voice sounding like grinding stones. We are discussing the security of the entire Sector 4. We are talking about cosmic threats and biological weapons. And yet, you walk into this sacred hall carrying a ball of useless fur. Tell me, is this how humans show their power? By carrying a tiny, helpless beast that does nothing but sleep? The general's many eyes blinked in mockery. The room was filled with the sound of alien laughter. They saw the cat as a symbol of human failure. Miller did not get angry. He didn't even frown. He slowly opened the top of the bag, and Leo hopped out. The small cat landed silently on the polished floor. He began to walk around the long council table, sniffing the expensive chairs. One alien leader jumped back in fear, then realized the cat was tiny and started laughing at himself. Is it dangerous? The leader asked sarcastically. Will it scratch our armor with its little toes? General Kraz leaned forward, his massive shadow falling over the small orange cat. I have heard of your planet's animals, Kraz sneered. Most species bring hunting hounds or giant lizards for protection. But humans, you are so mentally fragile, so weak, that you need these, emotional support, creatures just to survive the loneliness of space. You treat them like babies. It is pathetic. A species that depends on such a soft animal does not deserve a seat at this table. The other leaders nodded in agreement. They looked at Miller with pity. They thought humans were a joke. They believed that because humans loved something small and soft, humans themselves must be soft. Miller finally spoke. His voice was quiet but very steady. Leo is not here for my emotional support, General, he said. And he is certainly not a baby. He is a guest. On Earth, we have a very old relationship with his kind. We don't own them. We live with them, Kraz snorted, a puff of green smoke coming from his nose. He looks like he would run away from a shadow. Look at him. He is cleaning his own face while we discuss war. He is a distraction. He is a waste of oxygen. Kraz reached out a large, heavy hand to shoo Leo away. But before his hand could touch the cat, Leo moved. It wasn't a run, it was a blur. In a split second, the cat was 5 feet away, sitting perfectly still again. Cross froze. He hadn't even seen the cat move. Miller smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Leo is just relaxing right now, Miller said. He knows there is no danger in this room. He is very good at sensing energy. You see him as a toy because he is small. But where I come from, we know better. Size is not the same thing as power. The general laughed again, shaking his head. Enjoy your toy, Miller. But know this, the galaxy is a cold, dark place. There are monsters in the shadows that eat warriors for breakfast. Your little friend will be the first thing to scream when the real darkness comes. Miller picked Leo up and tucked him back into his bag. The cat looked at General Cross for a long moment. His yellow eyes were wide and unblinking. For a second, just a tiny second, Cross felt a strange shiver down his spine. It was the feeling of being watched by a predator. But he pushed the feeling away. He was a Zogan general. He wasn't afraid of a 10-pound ball of fur. As the meeting ended, the aliens left the room, still joking about the human and his golden toy. They had no idea that very soon, the lights would go out, and they would be praying for that toy to save their lives. The atmosphere in the galactic hub changed in an instant. The laughter from the council meeting had barely faded when a deep, vibrating hum shook the floor. It wasn't the sound of a ship landing, it was the sound of a power failure in the high-security wing. Suddenly, the bright blue lights of the station flickered and died. For 3 long seconds, there was total darkness. Then, the emergency red lights kicked in, bathing the silver hallways in a bloody, terrifying glow. A robotic voice began to scream over the speakers, "Breach in Sector 7. Biological Asset 4-9 has escaped." Lockdown initiated. General Cross and the other alien leaders froze. Biological Asset 4-9 was better known as the Viper Wolf. It was a creature designed for one thing, ending life. It was a genetic nightmare with the speed of a serpent and the crushing jaws of a wolf. More importantly, it had a special ability: it could blend into its surroundings like a ghost. The Zogan guards, who were supposed to be the bravest warriors in the galaxy, immediately pulled out their heavy plasma rifles. Their hands were shaking. They knew that their high-tech sensors often failed to track the Viper Wolf until it was too late. In the middle of this panic, Captain Miller remained seated. He didn't reach for a gun. He didn't run for the exit. Instead, he reached down and unzipped Leo's travel bag completely. The orange cat stepped out onto the cold floor. Leo didn't look scared. His ears were twitching, rotating like tiny satellite dishes, catching sounds that the aliens couldn't hear. His pupils had grown so large that his eyes looked like 2 black tunnels. While the aliens were looking at the doors, Leo was looking at the ceiling vents that a loud crash echoed from the ventilation shafts above them. Something heavy was moving through the metal pipes. The sound of metal scratching metal sent shivers down everyone's spine. "It's in the vents," someone screamed. The guards started firing their blue plasma bolts at the ceiling, but they were shooting blindly. They were wasting energy and melting the ceiling, but they weren't hitting anything. The Viper Wolf was too fast. It was playing with them, moving from one pipe to another, enjoying the smell of their fear. Suddenly, a heavy metal vent cover tore off the wall and flew across the room, smashing into a stone pillar. From the dark hole, a shadow blurred past. A guard in the back of the room let out a short, sharp cry before being dragged upward into the darkness of the ceiling. His heavy rifle clattered to the floor, smoking. The room went silent, except for the sound of heavy breathing and the distant drip-drip of something hitting the floor. The invincible Zogan guards were terrified. Their thick armor felt like paper against an enemy they couldn't even see. General Cross backed away, his 6 eyes darting in every direction. "We need to get to the reinforced bunker," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Nothing can stop that thing. It's a biological weapon. He looked at Miller, who was still standing calmly by his chair. Human. Run, you fool. Your tiny animal will be nothing but a snack for that beast. It is coming for us all. Croz was a warrior who had fought in many wars, but he had never faced a predator that hunted from the shadows like this. The viper wolf finally showed itself. It dropped from the ceiling, landing silently on 4 long, muscular legs. It was terrifying. It had pale, translucent skin that shimmered as it tried to match the color of the red emergency lights. Its face was a nightmare of rows of needle-sharp teeth and glowing yellow eyes that mirrored Leo's, but with none of the cat's soul. It let out a low, hissing growl that made the air vibrate. It was 5 times the size of a human, and it looked like it could bite through steel. The monster ignored the guards and focused on the center of the room. It saw the weak human and the small orange cat. To the viper wolf, this was the easiest target. It began to circle them, its claws clicking softly on the metal floor. Click. 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 The sound was like a clock counting down to death. The alien leaders watched from the corners, too afraid to move. They were sure they were about to see Captain Miller and his pet get torn to pieces. They felt sorry for the human, but they were too scared to help. The monster ignored the guards and focused on the center of the room. It saw the weak human and the small orange cat. To the viper wolf, this was the easiest target. It began to circle them, its claws clicking softly on the metal floor. Click. 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 The sound was like a clock counting down to death. The alien leaders watched from the corners, too afraid to move. They were sure they were about to see Captain Miller and his pet get torn to pieces. They felt sorry for the human, but they were too scared to help. But something strange was happening. Leo wasn't backing away. The small cat didn't hiss, and he didn't run. Instead, he lowered his body close to the floor, his tail twitching just a little bit at the tip. To a human, it looked like a cat about to pounce on a toy. To the aliens, it looked like a suicide mission. Leo's eyes were locked onto the viper wolf's throat. The cat wasn't acting like a scared pet, he was acting like an apex predator who had just found a very large, very ugly mouse. Captain Miller looked at General Croz and then back at the monster. He didn't look like a man about to die. He looked like a man who was watching a show. You said the galaxy is a dark place, General, Miller said softly, his voice echoing in the quiet room. You were right. But you forgot one thing. Humans didn't survive the dark of Earth because we were the biggest. We survived because we made friends with the things that are even better at hunting in the dark than we are. The viper wolf let out a roar and prepared to lunge. The viper wolf didn't wait any longer. With a sound like a cracking whip, it launched its heavy body across the room. It moved so fast that the alien guards couldn't even pull their triggers. To the council members, it looked like a blur of gray skin and sharp teeth aimed directly at Captain Miller and the small orange cat. General Croz closed his eyes, not wanting to see the pathetic human pet get crushed. He expected to hear the sound of bones breaking. But instead, he heard something much stranger, the sound of the monster crashing into an empty metal chair. When Croz opened his eyes, he gasped. Captain Miller hadn't moved an inch, but Leo was gone. The viper wolf was shaking its head, looking confused. It had missed. It turned around, its yellow eyes scanning the floor, but the small orange cat was nowhere to be seen. The room was deathly quiet. Then, a soft scratch sounded from high above. Everyone looked up. Leo was sitting on top of a floating holographic projector, 10 feet in the air. He was calmly licking a single paw, looking down at the massive monster with total boredom. The aliens were frozen in shock. How did a small, weak creature jump that high? How did it move faster than a biological weapon? They didn't know that on Earth, cats have muscles like coiled springs and reaction times that make even snakes look slow. To the aliens, this was magic. To Leo, it was just a game of tag. The viper wolf let out a frustrated hiss. It jumped toward the projector, its claws tearing through the air, but Leo was already gone. He didn't just run, he moved in 3 dimensions. He bounced off a wall, landed on a guard's shoulder, and vanished behind a stone pillar before the monster could even land. The viper wolf was becoming angry. It was used to its prey screaming and running away. But this tiny orange creature was silent. It didn't smell like fear, it smelled like confidence. The monster began to sniff the air, its body low to the ground. It moved toward the pillar where Leo was hiding. The alien leaders held their breath. "The cat is trapped," whispered one of the council members. "There is nowhere for it to go. It's over." Even General Cross felt a strange sadness. He had mocked the cat, but he respected its speed. He thought the game was finally ending, but Captain Miller just watched with a small, knowing smile. He knew something the aliens didn't: cats have been hunting in the dark for millions of years. They don't fight with strength, they fight with physics and patience. As the viper wolf rounded the pillar, ready to bite, Leo didn't run away. Instead, he ran toward the monster. The cat slid under the beast's giant belly, and as he passed, his small, razor-sharp claws came out. A thin red line appeared on the monster's leg. It wasn't a deep wound, but it was enough to make the viper wolf howl in pain and rage. The monster spun around, snapping its jaws wildly, but Leo was like a ghost. He was already under a table, his tail twitching in excitement. The toy was now the one in control. The aliens watched in total disbelief. They saw the viper wolf, a creature that had killed armored soldiers, looking tired and frustrated. Its breath was heavy, and it was bleeding from 3 different small scratches. Meanwhile, the cat looked like he was having the time of his life. Leo wasn't just fighting, he was breaking the monster's mind. General Cross looked at Captain Miller. The human was leaning against a wall, crossing his arms. "What is that thing?" Cross whispered, his voice full of fear and wonder. "It's not a pet. It's a shadow with claws." Miller looked at the general and nodded slowly. "On my planet, we have a saying," Miller replied. "God made the lion, but he made the cat so humans could pet a tiger in their own living room. You are looking at 10 million years of hunting perfection. Your monster is a weapon, General. But my cat? My cat is a master." The viper wolf stopped moving. It realized it couldn't catch the cat by being fast. It decided to change tactics. It stopped growling and started to blend into the shadows, using its camouflage skin to disappear. The room became dark and silent once again. The aliens couldn't see the monster anymore. They felt the cold wind of death returning. They looked for Leo, but the cat was also sitting perfectly still in the shadows. It was a battle of 2 invisible hunters. The suspense was so thick it felt like no one could breathe. Who would make the first move? Suddenly, Leo's ears turned 180 degrees. He didn't use his eyes, he used his hearing. He heard the monster's heart beating inside the wall. He heard the sound of the monster's claws sliding against the floor. While the superior aliens were blind and helpless in the dark, the small human pet saw the world in high definition. Leo stood up, his back arching, and his fur standing on end. He let out a sound that wasn't a meow. It was a low, terrifying hiss that sounded like a demon. The game was over. Now, the hunt was truly beginning. The red emergency lights flickered and then buzzed, leaving the room in near total darkness. For the aliens, this was a death sentence. Their advanced eyes were designed for bright suns or high-tech screens, not the deep, pitch-black shadows of a dying space station. General Cross gripped his heavy rifle, his 6 eyes wide and useless. He could feel the cold air moving, a sign that the viper wolf was stalking closer. The invisible monster was a master of this environment. It was born in the dark. It lived for the hunt. But as the general waited for the end, he noticed something strange. The human, Captain Miller, was standing perfectly still, his hands in his pockets. He wasn't even trying to look for the beast. Suddenly, a high-pitched scream of metal rang out. The viper wolf had jumped from a high pillar, aiming for the general's throat. But it never reached its target. Halfway through the air, the invisible monster was hit by something small and incredibly fast. To the aliens, it looked like a blur of orange light. Leo had launched himself from a table with the power of a mechanical spring. He didn't just hit the monster, he used his front claws to latch onto its face and his back legs to kick with the strength of a professional fighter. The viper wolf crashed into the floor, its camouflage flickering and failing. For the first time, the perfect weapon looked clumsy. The monster scrambled to its feet, shaking its head in confusion. It was 5 times larger than Leo, but it couldn't understand how this tiny creature kept hitting it. The viper wolf lunged again, snapping its jaws where Leo had just been standing. But Leo wasn't there anymore. He was already on the other side of the room, sitting on a high shelf, looking down with cold, calculating eyes. The aliens were watching a miracle. They realized that while they were blind in the dark, the cat was seeing everything. To Leo, the room wasn't dark at all. His eyes were taking in every tiny bit of light, turning the shadows into a clear, bright map of the hunt. General Cross adjusted his tactical goggles, trying to see what the cat was doing. He saw Leo's body change. The cat's whiskers were fanned out, sensing the vibrations in the air. His tail was low and steady, acting as a rudder for perfect balance. Leo wasn't just a hairy creature anymore. He was a biological computer designed for one purpose, to find the weak spot of any enemy. The viper wolf tried to hide again, turning its skin to the color of the shadows, but it was useless. Leo's ears were twitching, tracking the monster's heartbeat. No matter where the beast moved, Leo's head followed it with terrifying precision. The viper wolf was no longer the hunter. It was now the prey, and it knew it. It started to back away, its low growl turning into a whimper. It had never faced anything like this. It was used to prey that ran and screamed. It wasn't used to a tiny creature that stayed silent and moved like a ghost. The monster tried one last, desperate attack. It charged toward the shelf where Leo sat. But as it jumped, Leo didn't move away. He moved into the attack. He flipped in midair, a move that defied gravity, and landed squarely on the monster's back, the room filled with the sound of the viper wolf's roars and the sharp, angry hissing of the cat. Leo's claws were like 20 small daggers, digging into the monster's neck. He wasn't just scratching, he was looking for the main nerves. The toy was dismantling a billion-dollar biological weapon with its bare paws. The alien guards stood with their mouths open. They had the biggest guns in the galaxy, but they were too afraid to use them. Meanwhile, this useless pet was winning a war all by itself. They realized that humans didn't bring cats into space because they were lonely, they brought them because cats were the ultimate security system. Captain Miller finally spoke, his voice calm in the middle of the chaos. You see, General. On Earth, we have many large predators. Bears, lions, wolves. But the cat is different. A cat is the only animal that hunts for the fun of it. To Leo, this isn't a fight for survival. This is the most exciting game he has played in years. As Miller spoke, Leo delivered a powerful strike to the monster's eye. The viper wolf let out a final, agonizing cry and collapsed to the floor, too tired and too hurt to keep fighting. The invincible beast was broken. Leo hopped off the monster's back and landed silently on the floor. He didn't celebrate. He didn't look for praise. He simply walked over to a nearby rug and began to lick a small patch of fur on his leg that had been ruffled during the fight. The red emergency lights finally stopped flickering and turned back to a steady, bright white. The room was illuminated, showing the giant monster bleeding and defeated on the floor, and a small, 10-pound orange cat sitting nearby, looking perfectly calm. The silence in the room was heavy. The aliens looked at the cat, and then they looked at the human. Their laughter was gone. It was replaced by a deep, shivering respect. The bright white lights of the council hall remained steady, but the room felt colder than it ever had before. The viper wolf lay in the center of the room, its massive body shivering. Blue, Glowing blood leaked from the small but deep scratches on its neck and face. It was alive, but its spirit was broken. The ultimate biological weapon was hiding its head behind its claws, trying to stay as far away from the small orange cat as possible. The alien leaders, the most powerful beings in the galaxy, stayed pressed against the walls. They didn't look at the monster with fear anymore, they looked at Leo. They looked at the cat with a kind of horror that words could barely describe. General Cross was the first to move. He stepped forward, his heavy boots making a metallic clank on the floor. His 6 eyes were fixed on Leo, who was now calmly sitting on his haunches, cleaning his whiskers. The general's hands were empty, he had dropped his plasma rifle long ago. "It is impossible," Cross whispered, his voice shaking with a mix of shame and wonder. "We spent billions of credits to create a hunter that could not be stopped. We gave it armor, camouflage, and poison. And you brought a creature that weighs less than a gallon of water, and it has defeated our greatest achievement without even getting a scratch." The other council members began to murmur. The laughter from earlier was completely gone. In its place was a deep, uncomfortable silence. They realized that their entire understanding of strength was wrong. They thought strength was about size and big guns. But they had just watched a tiny creature use speed, gravity, and ancient instincts to win a war. One of the leaders, a thin alien with 4 arms, pointed at Captain Miller. "You lied to us, human," he shouted, though his voice was filled with more fear than anger. "You said this was a pet. You said it was a companion. This is not a pet. This is a biological assassin. You brought a hidden weapon into our sacred hall." Captain Miller didn't get angry. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply walked to the center of the room and stood next to Leo. He reached down and gently scratched the cat behind the ears. The change in Leo was instant. The terrifying, hissing demon disappeared. The cat let out a loud, vibrating purr and leaned his head into Miller's hand. He looked like the useless ball of fur again. "He is a pet," Miller said softly, his voice echoing in the large room. "But what you don't understand is what a pet means on Earth. We don't keep animals because they are weak. We keep them because we respect their power." Miller looked around at the shocked faces of the aliens. "On my planet, we have a very old history. Thousands of years ago, we were the ones being hunted in the dark. We were small and soft, just like you think we are now. But then, we made a deal with the small hunters of the world. We gave them a warm place to sleep and all the food they could eat. In return, they agreed to guard our homes from the things that crawl in the night." Miller paused, looking at the defeated Viper Wolf. "Leo didn't hunt your monster because I told him to. He hunted it because this room is now his home, and your monster was a threat to his people. To him, this wasn't a galactic crisis. It was just a very big rat." General Cross looked at his soldiers, who were still standing frozen with their rifles. He felt a deep sense of embarrassment. "We mocked you," Cross said, lowering his head. "We called humans weak because you carry these creatures. But we were the weak ones. We rely on machines and sensors to tell us where the enemy is. Your cat, he knew where the monster was before our computers did. He didn't need a visor to see in the dark. He is the dark." The general finally understood the truth. Humans weren't soft because they had pets, they were dangerous because they had the friendship of killers. The tension in the room began to fade, but it was replaced by a new kind of respect. The aliens looked at Miller and Leo with wide eyes. They realized that if a tiny cat could do this much damage, they never wanted to see what a human would do if they actually got angry. But just as the council was about to call for medical teams to take the monster away, a new alarm began to blare. This one was different. It wasn't a biological breach alarm. It was a combat alarm. The station's computer screamed, "Inbound fleet detected. The Xylos invaders have arrived. Shield failure in 60 seconds, the aliens panicked once again." The Viper Wolf had been a distraction, a way to weaken the station before the real attack started. The Xylos were a cruel race that spared no one. General Cross looked at Miller, his 6 eyes full of desperation. "The station is trapped," Cross said. "Our guards are disorganized. Our sensors are down. We are blind." He looked down at Leo, who had stopped purring and was now looking at the ceiling again, his tail twitching with new energy. Can your small hunter help us again? Or are we truly lost in the dark?" Miller looked at Leo and then at the general. "The hunt isn't over yet," Miller said. "It's just getting bigger," the station groaned as the Xylos boarding pod slammed into the hull. The Xylos were a cold, calculated species that used thick, black smoke to blind their enemies before they attacked. Within minutes, the beautiful silver hallways of the galactic hub were filled with a dark, choking fog. The alien guards tried to use their thermal goggles, but the smoke was designed to block heat signatures too. The council members were huddled in the center of the hall, shivering in the dark. They could hear the metallic footsteps of the Xylos soldiers coming closer. The invaders were famous for their ghost suits, which made them invisible to sensors. They were the ultimate hunters of the stars, or so they thought. General Cross stood with his back to the wall, holding his chest. "We are blind," he shouted over the sound of explosions. "We cannot fight what we cannot see." But then, he felt a soft brush against his leg. It was Leo. The orange cat wasn't hiding. His tail was held high, and he was walking calmly through the thick smoke as if it weren't even there. For a cat, sight is only one part of the hunt. Leo was using the tiny hairs in his ears and his long, sensitive whiskers to feel the vibrations in the air. He could hear the Xylos soldiers breathing. He could smell the oil on their guns. To Leo, the smoke was just a playground. Captain Miller put on a simple breathing mask and looked at the terrified general. "You don't need sensors, General. You just need to follow the cat." Miller didn't pull out a heavy weapon. He simply held a small glow stick. "Leo! Hunt!" Miller commanded. The cat didn't hesitate. He vanished into the black smoke like a ghost. A moment later, a terrifying scream echoed from the hallway. Then another. The Xylos soldiers, who thought they were the only ones who could move in the dark, were being attacked by something they couldn't track. Leo was jumping off the walls, scratching at the soft joints of their suits, and disappearing before they could even turn around. The Xylos invaders were in a state of pure panic. Their radios were filled with confused shouts, "Something is in the smoke. It's small. It's fast. My sensors show nothing." The invaders started firing their weapons wildly, hitting the walls and each other. They were terrified of the invisible orange demon that was stalking them. Miller and the Zogon guards followed the sound of the chaos. Every time they found a group of Xylos soldiers, the invaders were already distracted, trying to catch a cat that was 10 steps ahead of them. The guards easily finished the job, capturing the confused invaders one by one. The leader of the Xylos, a tall, thin alien in a golden suit, finally reached the council hall. He thought he had reached the prize. He raised his weapon to the council members, ready to claim the station. But he never got to pull the trigger. From the top of a high chandelier, a small orange blur dropped onto his head. Leo didn't just scratch him, he landed with his full weight and dug his claws into the golden helmet. The Xylos leader stumbled, screaming and waving his arms, trying to get the creature off. Captain Miller stepped out of the smoke and calmly took the weapon from the leader's hand. "The hunt is over," Miller said. As the smoke finally cleared, the station went quiet. The Xylos invasion had been defeated in less than 20 minutes. The most feared army in the galaxy had been broken, not by a massive fleet, but by a 10-pound cat and a few guards who knew how to follow him. The council members stood up, cleaning the dust from their expensive robes. They looked at the floor, where dozens of Xylos soldiers were being led away in handcuffs. Then, they looked at Leo. The cat was sitting in the middle of the room, calmly licking a piece of gray dust off his paw. He looked like he had just finished a nap, not a war. General Cross walked over to Captain Miller. The giant alien warrior bowed his head low, a sign of the highest respect. "Captain," the general said, his voice deep and humble. "Today, we learned the most important lesson in the history of the galaxy. We looked at your pet and saw a weakness. We looked at your kindness and saw a flaw. But we were the blind ones. You didn't bring a toy into space. You brought a partner that has been perfected by nature for millions of years." Kraz reached out a finger, and this time, when Leo sniffed it, the general didn't pull away. He felt the soft fur and the hidden strength beneath it. From that day on, the laws of the galactic hub were changed forever. Humans were no longer seen as the weak newcomers. They were recognized as the masters of the most dangerous and loyal creatures in the universe. A new statue was built in the center of the Great Hall. It wasn't a statue of a soldier or a king. It was a statue of a small, orange earth cat with his ears pointed forward, watching the darkness. The caption on the statue was simple, written in every language of the galaxy: "Respect the small, for they guard the great." And whenever a new alien species arrived at the station and laughed at a human pet, the older aliens would simply whisper, "Don't. You have no idea what that pet can do in the dark."